Thanks for having me here. I'm standing here on behalf of Joris van Eynata because he unfortunately is a little bit ill, so he's not able to be here today. So I hope that I make justice to his slides. So I want to report a little bit, tell you about the Future of Research Software workshop that took place in Amsterdam earlier this month. So I'll tell you about about why we organized this event, how the event took place, what is it that what we did during the event, what is the goal of organizing this founders workshop, and what was the process that we followed, and that will continue to follow. In terms of the why, I think I don't need to convince anyone in these calls that research software is crucial for today's academic research. So research software is used in virtually every field of research, from genetics to model protein interactions, in the life sciences and in humanities. I know archaeologists use all sorts of LiDAR maps to do archaeological discoveries. And of course, the central image here is the picture of the black hole that was taken by the Event Horizon Telescope, which of course is not the real telescope, but is a combination of telescopes that is basically made by software. Climate modeling, of course, is something that heavily relies on software to do all types of simulations and predictions of climate and the weather. And machine learning, of course, it's a field that is very growing and popular, and that it's impossible, or it's very difficult to think of machine learning without actually using software. And for most of the research process, we have data that is processed and transformed by some form of software to produce some scientific results. And that's what we are used to being the scientific pipeline nowadays. But of course, we know that if software is left unattended and it's abandoned, then it breaks over time. And then if software breaks, we're unable to reproduce the previous result as we would like to. There has been some efforts to bring more prominence to software, like the San Francisco Declaration Research Assessment and the COARA, the agreement on reforming research assessment. So that there's been more attention on how can we value more software as a academic output, but we wanted to really do something more specific to software, and that's where we had the idea. Okay, let's organize a workshop in which we can bring funders together to talk about how can we make software more prominent, and not just the software, but also, and probably more important, the people who develop the software. How can we make sure that this is valued and that the software and the people that develop it are sustained in the long term? So that was the idea. So as an eScience Center, the eScience Center was created by SURF and NWO. And one of the main things that we try to do is to bring more recognition to software and to the people who develop it. And this year was the 10-year anniversary of the eScience Center. So here you can see a group of lovely people who I'm very proud to call my colleagues at the eScience Center. And we had a celebration for our 10-year anniversary. And as part of that, things that we want to do to sort of like mark the time that we spent in this ecosystem is to try to contribute to really bringing recognition to software. And with that, okay, let's try to team up with RISA and come up with this Amsterdam Declaration of Software. So we got together a whole bunch of organizations that are interested in software, that have funding of research software as part of their of their mission. So we got together this whole bunch of beautiful organizations that were interested to join us and talk about the topic of research software. And together with our organizing committee and advisory committee, we put together a program for having these interesting and yeah, difficult conversations about how can we make sure that research funders do more to give software a proper space and proper recognition in their funding strategies and their funding plans for the future. So how we did that? We had a series of really nice keynote presentations from research perspective and from the funders perspective, and they're really trying to bring together and from also from the research software perspective, trying to bring together, okay, these ideas. Okay, we have software. Software is part of the science process. We need the software because it has an impact in science, but we also need to make sure that the software is preserved. So through a series of different presentations, we were trying to present to funders why is this important. Because funders are not necessarily very intimate with the process of developing research software. So we wanted to make sure that they knew why this was important. And basically the keynotes were basically providing all the background information that funders needed for the discussions. And then how did we do this? We continue to have discussions and roundtable discussions with about 50 people from more than 40 organizations from around the world. And basically the idea was that discussing the role that funders can play in supporting sustainable research software. So what can funders do to make sure that research software can be sustained in the long term, so that software is not just funded for one project, but that it can be sustained beyond the project if that's if that helps for the software. And of course, we know this is not the case. It will not always be the case for every piece of software, but for pieces of software that are necessary to sustain, that they are sustainable. So at the beginning of the workshop, we had a first draft of what we call the Amsterdam Declaration on Funding Research Software Sustainability. Actually, this initial document has already been deposited in Zenodo with this DOI. And at the moment, a small writing team of very wise people are taking all the feedback that we collected from all the funders during the workshop, and they're working on a new version of this text of this declaration. The declaration, of course, contains a little bit of an overview of the context. Why is software important, and what's the role that it plays in research? It has contains some principles in outlining why software needs to be sustained, and some recommendations on how funders can make sure that this software is sustained in their funding mechanisms. And we also want to include some best practices that funders are already doing. So things that funders are already doing or can do in their funding programs to make sure that software is sustainable in the longer term. Some of these principles are outlined here. So I'm just going to read from this slide. Just the principles that are in the declaration in its initial version is that research software is critical to research. Sustainable research software is vital to the reproducibility of research outcomes. Sustainable research software provides the progress of research. Research software sustainability requires collaboration between public and private partners on a global scale. The shelf life of research software is relative. That's what I was referring to before, that also not all software needs to be sustained in the same timelines. Research software should adhere to open science standards. I think that that's also something that's important to clarify there, is that ideally all software should be open, but we know that it's not always possible. So that there's some discussion there as well. And finally, that a crucial factor in research software sustainability is reusability. So software shouldn't only be sustained for the sake of being sustained, but because we want it to be reused. So some of the recommendations that were already covered in the declaration are along the topics of open science, about funding instruments, and about the recognition and rewards and assessment of software. So these were some of the major topics that were where all the recommendations fell in these major topics. And this is how the discussions were structured. Now, with all the feedback that we collected from the workshop, what the adoption plan is for the coming months is that, as I mentioned, there's a small writing group that is working on the text at the moment. In the first quarter of 2023, we'll open a consultation process to a more wider working group that we of experts in the field, and afterwards we'll also open the consultation process to being a more open public consultation, where the different funders or different organizations will be able to provide more feedback. We aim to finalize the text of the declaration at some point in the second quarter of next year, and after that we'll do a series of online meetings with potential signatory parties to maybe to gain more momentum and to gain more or clarify things around the declaration and what is the commitment that they would be making in signing this declaration. And then we hope to have a signing event late next year or early 2024, in which different organizations that are supporting this Amsterdam Declaration of Research Funding Research Software will be able to sign the declaration.